dry run on top 10 movies that were influenced on me as a game master, uh, starting with actually the way they're numbered, number one. I should probably reverse this as the one that has the least direct influence on my gaming, but of the 10. But I don't know if this is really in any particular order, so I'll start with number one, Patton. Patton was a big influence on me in general. Patton is a modern World War II film. Was made in the late '60s with a screenplay by Francis Ford Coppola. It's a was made before the Vietnam War ended. It was starring George C. Scott in Academy Award winning role. Is absolutely one of my all time favorite movies. It's right there in my top three movies I ever watched, especially as a kid. From 1978 or 1979 when my dad made a recording of Patton off of television, or if he bought a videotape. I can't remember now, but I think he bought a videotape of Patton, and me and my brother would watch that every day, just like we would later watch Star Wars, which is a movie that is not on this list because Star Wars never had that big of an impact on me as a game master or as a player. Even though I did really love Star Wars, or as it's referred to now, A New Hope. It was never referred to as A New Hope until, I don't know, the 90s, the late 90s maybe. It was always Star Wars. It was always Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. We never called it A New Hope. Um, but Patton was a big influence because Patton was a anachronism, and the anachronism of him being a figure out of medieval history instead of being a person of modernity. And it was interesting. That is more or less how he saw himself, and it also is how he conducted himself. And it's definitely, the movie very much plays up to that, and almost plays up to his belief in himself as being a sort of eternal champion, a figure born and born again to fight wars, going at least all the way back to the time of the Roman and Carthaginian War. I believe going back to the Third Punic War is what he's talking about. But there's a scene in the movie where he's in Tunisia, and he's in a ruin that was once a Carthaginian city, and he describes the battle that took place, and he sees himself as one of the Carthaginian soldiers fighting against the Romans. This is definitely an influence on me as a Patton is a even though he's a modern figure, he's easy to get a hold of, easy to think about, easy to imagine. He is the template, the archetype of the sort of military commander, the great military commander, the great military mind, and he does play a part of that in my games. The eternal champion view of himself, this view of himself as a master of war going back centuries, is also a big part of something that I imagine, and also reappears in the works, especially in two specific areas, the uh, the the character of like Miles Tegg and the other reincarnations of Duncan Idaho in the Dune series, and of course the awakened memories of both Duke both the God Emperor Leto and Muad'Dib's sister, Ali of the Knife, and also the it appears again with especially with the character of Matt in the Wheel of Time series, which I never finished, but Matt also had that awakening of these past memories. Is very much how this is very much how George Smith Patton viewed himself. He thought himself as being a reincarnated being from time immemorial, and at least going back as far as that that Carthaginian figure that he was, that Carthaginian soldier. He definitely saw himself as being reincarnated across many, many wars, across millennia. And if that isn't something that speaks directly of fantasy, then I don't know what is. The next on my list is Northwest Passage. Now, Northwest Passage is a movie starring Robert Young from Father Knows Best. If uh, anybody watching this, like 90% of the people they'll have no idea who that is, and also starring Spencer Tracy, who is also will be a character that many people an actor many people will not know, but Spencer Tracy is considered one of the greatest actors of his generation, and this movie is set during the French and Indian War, better known as the 7 Years' War. The battles in the what's would soon be the United States and Canada were called the French and Indian Wars. But it was just one theater of what was a world war. The 7 Years' War was a world war, with the bulk of the fighting and the most important fighting being done, of course, in Europe. But during this war, the French and Indians aligned against the Anglo-Saxons, who were settler colonists in North America, and the tales of a figure called Rogers. I forgot his first name, but Rogers Rangers. He was a legitimate historical figure. Rogers Rangers gave name and inspiration to Rangers in the U.S. military. There's a reason why he's a big part of the reason why the U.S. military has a unit called Rangers. The Rangers are named are his namesakes. There's almost a lineal descent from the Rangers of Rogers Rangers to the current Rangers. It is, as you can imagine, the Rangers were irregular soldiers. They wore buckskins. They were not formation fighting. They did not wear they're not red coat wearing formation fighting English soldiers. They were irregular soldiers, fought irregularly against the Indians and, of course, against the French, their allies at the time. The war, the story is of Robert Young's character getting brought into the Rogers Rangers, basically being, he's pretty much shanghaied into it, and he comes along on this perilous flight through the wilderness where Rogers Rangers get into a bit more trouble than they are prepared to fight, and they are trailed through a wilderness by both the French army and by their Indian allies. They are tracked through a dismal swamp. There are numerous things that have an influence on me from that. It is the long, perilous cross-country wilderness travel with all its apparent dangers. Even though it's a fighting force, it's not just a group of adventurers. It's not a group of 6 or 8 or 12 even. It's an entire, probably 300 or 400 men crossing this swamp. And among the things that happen, that also they have to fight their way through. But one of the characters, a minor character, but a character nonetheless, breaks his ankle in the swamp, and he's just sitting on a stump in this one scene, as all the other soldiers go walking past him, and he has a very matter of fact way of looking at it that he is definitely going to die, but he has weapons with him, and he plans on killing a few Indians on his way out. So the men coming by take his water, take his food, hand him a little extra ammunition, and maybe an extra sidearm, and he just sits there with his tobacco and his guns, and that is what he's going to do. He is going to make them pay to take his life, as these Indians are very much just hours behind these desperate men. Another member of Rogers Rangers that actually it's a pretty dark storyline, considering the movie was made in the late 30s, early 40s. Is cannibalism. One of the Rangers, they're starving to death as they're fleeing these Indians, and he finds a source of food. I believe he cuts the head off of an Indian, and he eats from that severed body part, and he ends up being confronted about it, and it leads to him committing suicide out of disgrace and out of fear of the possible punishment for his horrific act. I mean, it was frankly a horrific act. The army they get all the way through the swamp to a place of safety, or what they thought would be a place of safety, to this military fort. But they get there and the fort's abandoned. There's no food for them. There's no provisions. There's no, and the fort is not a place where they can stand and fight. They don't have the resources to stand and fight. They're fucked. So it ends up with the redcoats showing up and bringing supplies to them, and there's a lot of fighting in this movie. It's a character driven. Robert Young's character gets injured too, but he limps along with the help of a native woman who helps him to get through the swamp. She's a prisoner, so she's not an ally of Rogers Rangers, but she basically ends up helping him along, and he ends up fighting his way in the figurative sense, fighting his way through and surviving. And its influence on me is because it's such an amazing wilderness travel, and it's, as you'll see, the travel across dangerous wilderness, very much something I associate with Dungeons and Dragons. It's the idea of a group of adventurers trying to evade a hunting party is very much something I very much love. That idea. It was a big influence on me. Next is in a similar vein, Big Sky. Big Sky is another very old movie with starring Kirk Douglas, young Kirk Douglas, who is traveling up the Missouri, and on a boat with a bunch of French fur trappers, and they are again attacked by Indians. The real villains of the story are a group of amoral traders who are trading with the hostile Indians in the region. There's also a love story where there's a love triangle between Kirk Douglas, another character, and a Indian, basically an Indian princess. Of course, very attractive, and she, and the man she's attracted to doesn't want to be with her because he just thinks it's ridiculous to be married to some savage Indian. And of course, Kirk Douglas's character and his uncle, who's also a major character in the story, can see that she is a quality woman, and he's a fool for spurning her attraction. But that's not the part of the story that I really care that much about. The part of the story I care about is, again, they're on a boat, they're traveling upriver, and they are being harassed constantly by an enemy. And again, I think of Dungeons and Dragons. Again, this same image appears of these hostiles attacking as these party tries to negotiate their way across a vast and dangerous wilderness, a vast and dark wilderness. There are ambushes by the Indians. I believe the the Indians that are the bad guys are Blackfeet or Crow. I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It's been a while since I watched that movie. Uh, if you know, I guess Big Sky is set in supposed to be set in Montana, I assume. Now, if I remember correctly, it is, but it's in the eastern part of the prairie, the desert-like prairie of eastern Montana. Anyway, the I've always loved eastern Montana my whole life. Every time I look at a line of trees in the wilderness here in Montana, I can see goblins on warged back, sharpening their weapons, ready to ride down out of the tree line onto me. And that sort of image was made very much real when I saw Lord of the Rings, especially the Two Towers. The ambush scene in the Two Towers was like something I had seen my whole life ever since I was a kid. Every time we traveled into the West, I could always see that sort of thing going on in my head. So I was very excited about that being played out in front of me in the Two Towers. But very much like that, that is what's going on here with the mighty with this ship being harassed, raided, attacked. They have to fight their way through. They have to negotiate their way through. They have to retreat, evade, all the sort of things that wilderness adventure in an OSR setting implies. So this again sets in my mind the way it was. Only this time, instead of being men tramping across pitiless swampland, this is men traveling down a navigable river and having to fight. Use the barge that they're using. It's basically just a barge. They have to use it almost as a fortification in order to hold off enemy attacks. And this time, this is a pretty small group. This is a group that, from an OSR point of view, is probably pretty good size. 15, 16 people, I think, if you think of it as a OSR adventuring group with an old school adventuring group with their henchmen and a few hirelings. This is actually a pretty representative size, and the groups that are attacking them are large enough to be to be menacing to them. They fight them off, but they don't defeat them. There's no heroic charge into the midst of these Indian braves who would certainly destroy them in an open fight. Enough of them die from arrow wounds. The only thing that keeps the Indians at bay is the fact that these men are traveling with firearms, and they are able to kill a few and drive them off and inflict injuries and wounds on enough that it keeps them from overwhelming and just riding into the middle of the river and killing them. They end up basically being bailed out by the Indian woman, who ends up traveling to her father's people and bring them back the reinforcements that drive off the hostile Indians. And then they trade with these Indians, which was the intent of the journey anyway, was to trade with these non-hostile Indians. And the hostile Indians, this sort of journey into Indian territory, which is a terminology still used by the U.S. military, of course. The U.S. military still calls hostile territory Indian territory. The U.S. Army does, at least. This sort of thing is, you place Indians with orcs, and all of a sudden you have a very similar dynamic. The orcs are the eternally hostile, while perhaps, say, transpose this to the Forgotten Realms, which I very much have in the past. The hostile Indians, instead of hostile Indians, you have orcs, and instead of peaceful Indians and Indians you can trade with, you have the Uthgardt barbarians, who are a shamanistic people who have a sort of they're sort of a cross between American Indians and the Sumerians of Robert E. Howard. At least that's the way I've always looked at them. So that that's why that was an influence on me. Now, the next one is The Man in the Wilderness. Now, The Man in the Wilderness is a very similar story to another movie that came out and won some Oscars a few years back uh, with Leonardo DiCaprio. Blanking on the name of it now. All of a sudden, anyway, but it's the same thing, same basic story. Man gets attacked by bear. His the people he's traveling with leave him behind, and he has to try and come back and catch back up to them. He has to travel through, again, hostile Indian territory to catch back. This time, there's also a ship involved, and this time it's a boat that's going to go sailing, I believe, down the Missouri again. I could be misremembering, but I think they're trying to get to the Missouri. But instead of the ship being on water, the ship's on land because they're traveling across land with this ship. So again, the boat is a sort of fortress. And this time it's traveling across land. The kind of thing that it's like a traveling castle. This boat is more than just merely a barge. It does have a cannon on it, not a big cannon. It doesn't do a big broadside, but has enough. And this movie stars Richard Harris, an amazing Irish actor. Uh, people again, maybe not everyone watching this, but people might remember him. Will probably mostly remember him as Dumbledore from the Harry Potter movies. He was the original Dumbledore. He was the Dumbledore of the first few movies, and but he was in a lot of movies, a lot of television, and he was a he plays basically he's the part of the man who gets attacked by the bear, left behind, left for dead, and traverses his way to catch up. John Huston, the magnificent American director and actor who directed a lot of great old Hollywood movies. Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where he directed actually his father, the actor Walter Huston, and one of my all-time favorite movies, The Man Who Would Be King. He's and a lot of movies in between, including, if I remember correctly, he directed The Maltese Falcon. I remember that correctly, am I? Anyway, but he was a magnificent director during the golden age of Hollywood, whose career lasted well into the 70s. His daughter is Angelica Houston from all those Wes Anderson movies. Fantasy and science fiction people may best remember him as the voice of Gandalf in the Rankin and Bass Hobbit movie. He's Gandalf in The Hobbit, and he's also Gandalf in the Rankin and Bass version of The Return of the King, which is utterly inferior to The Hobbit. The Hobbit's much simpler storyline, easier for them to get, and both the movies are memorable for their singing, their musical numbers. Anyway, this movie was a big influence because, again, lone man in the wilderness, also adventuring the wilderness. Often in D&D adventuring, the party is often extremely well equipped and clearly better equipped than your average group of Uthgar barbarians or brigands or bandits, and also better than orcs, goblins, hobgoblins. And that is again what this reminds me of. They're traveling across this land, the big boat being dragged behind a whole huge team of horses. This is done with obviously with practical effects. I have literally no idea how they got those scenes shot of the team of horses dragging a boat across land. I have to assume that they did it practically. Because it definitely looks like it. It's long before there was any sort of hint of CGI. This movie came out right around the year I was born, around 1971 or 1972. So there was no And I don't see any sign of miniatures either. This was not claim. This was not stop motion, not claymation. It was definitely done in camera. How they did it, I don't exactly know, but it's pretty impressive. There's a couple. There's a big battle scene near the end where the hostile Indians attack the boat and are driven off by artillery fire and by the men of this expedition holding off. There is John Huston's character is a sort of a villainous, almost Ahab-like character, and it's pretty effective. The movie, though, is pretty good. Is more again a sense of. I mean, it gives me a sense of place and time, and it was a huge influence. These Western these, as you can see, these early books. There's a lot of Westerns in this. One World War II movie, and followed by 4 Westerns in a row. The Northwest Passage is not a Western in the sense of it being set here in the West, here out like in Montana or whatever. But at the time, it was the Western frontier of the United States. This happens in an area around the Ohio River Valley and Michigan. So that's the old Northwest before before America had the Louisiana Purchase and the annexation of all that territory west of the Mississippi. So it is still a Western in that sense. It is a frontier civilization. But now we start getting away from the Westerns to some degree, especially with this next one. The oops, I did not mean to smack the camera like that. But the next movie is Ran. Ran is my all-time favorite movie. It is directed by Akira Kurosawa, shot in full color. It is a fantastic, dark, and not a very cheerful movie. However, it's a big influence on me because it is a story. It is essentially a samurai version of, or I shouldn't say samurai. It's a Japanese interpretation of King Lear by Shakespeare. It is the story of, in this one, 3 sons who are heirs to Lord Ichimonji, and they are going to, and the Lord, who's this vicious warlord, decides he's going to divide his territory among his 3 sons. The youngest son tells his father he's a fool. He gets cast out. The father divides the land with his 2 sons. 2 sons betray the father, just as the younger son had predicted. The father basically is driven insane by what happens, and it has 2 of the most magnificent battle scenes ever put to film, and that's saying a lot because Kurosawa, Kagemusha has also one of the greatest battle scenes ever put to film. Kurosawa is a absolute genius, and again, its effect on me as a game master is the effect of the way politics works. I literally built an entire campaign around around this movie and a few others actually, but one of the central family struggling for control in this fantasy setting was based on Lord Ichimonji, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives, and it is a gigantic, epic movie. Its influence on me is not so much as some sort of fantasy, but as a dark story, but also as a way of showing politics, the way politics at the kind of level that an adventuring company can deal with. Ichimonji is not the ruler of an empire. He has 3 castles. There's a 4th castle, the original castle he ends up going to and he has a retinue of, I don't know, 100 maybe men at most, and there's a grand battle that happens. It's magnificent, and it's where Lord Ichimonji loses his grip on reality. Uh, it is a fantastic movie for that reason. Beautiful combat scenes. Again, not shot in a simple, not a shot in a with special effects. The well, I mean, there are special effects, but it's not an effects shot. It's not a uh, pretend castle. They actually built a castle. They actually built these castles, and they actually shot these battles, and they are absolutely magnificent. There's a battle in the that where the Lord Ichimonji's first castle, and then there's a castle. There's a battle at the end of the movie that is gigantic. It's one of the most titanic battles ever put to film. It is absolutely magnificent. There's a scene where an army is going across the screen, and soldier after soldier after soldier goes, and it's not guys on a turntable. It's cavalry and infantry and all. It's magnificent colors, and it just speaks to my wargaming mind and my sense of grandeur at the end of politics and military conflict. The next movie is another Kurosawa, Seven Samurai. Also, of course, The Magnificent Seven. I saw The Magnificent Seven first. Seven Samurai is a better movie. It's a longer movie. Uh, Magnificent Seven does have its strong points, though. Eli Wallach is much more of a presence in that story. He's the villain, and he has much more of a presence in that movie. And again, this is a story of both stories are a story of brigands, bandits being saved by adventurers, and literally, I don't know if I can say anything more about it other than that they're both magnificent movies, and they are the best part of the movie is the gathering of the adventuring company, the gathering of the Seven Samurai. It's an absolutely fantastic segment. It goes on for quite a while because each samurai has his own introduction. Some of them are actually pretty simple. Some of them are more straightforward. It is a very, very wonderful. It's a wonderful movie. Uh, it is an adventuring company. Just there's no magic. The next one that's a big influence on me, of course, is heavy metal. Now, heavy metal, we're getting more directly into sort of fantasy films here. Heavy metal, this is, of course, the main one that I'm thinking of, the main two I'm thinking of, is the story of Ula Tech. I forget the name of the character that John Candy voices, the character who gets to the planet, saves the beautiful woman, flies off at the end, and of course, the longest segment of the entire movie, which is Tarna and her battle, what is it called, the Tarakian, her flying like reptile bird, whatever that thing is, all that stuff, pure fantasy. Even if it is kind of it is in more in the 70s vein of being science fantasy. There's obvious signs of advanced technology, but the battle is on with swords against powerful weapons. There are crossbows and even like semi-automatic. That final storyline was hugely influential on me. Of course, I saw it when I was 9. Uh, there's a great deal of sexual content that I was exposed to when I watched that movie, but and that definitely didn't hurt my attention span on this, but definitely it's near the top of it's near the top of my list because it is just such a grand adventure, and the Dark Lord is defeated. Then it's revealed that the girl in the house, the framing story that she is a Tarakian. She's the future. She's the future ancestor. She's the ancestor of the future last Tarakian, who is the Tarna, who is the super hot mute blonde chick at the end of the movie. Uh, the next is, of course, I mean, again, the next three are all fantasy movies, and the only one of the few movies that I watch more than Star Wars, and probably the only movie on this, probably the only movie. I probably watched this movie more than Star Wars. Probably the only movie on this list, but it might be close to the next one too. I might have watched it more than Star Wars too, uh, and I probably watched it more than Patton. Conan the Barbarian. Conan the Barbarian. I got into the comic books first, then I saw this movie, and then again I was very young when this movie came out, 10. So again, great deal of graphic violence and sexual content, and it's still, and it brought me to Conan. But I mean, we know the storyline. We know the story. Arnold Schwarzenegger playing the character. We know of Thulsa Doom. We know of his his snaky, shape shifting abilities. It's a fantastic fantasy story. I agree with the late great Gary Gygax that it is not Conan. It's not that, even though it's titled Conan, the character is not Conan. Doesn't make it any less of a fun movie to watch, and of course, it is absolutely elevated by its soundtrack by Basil Polidoris. Still, Basil Polidoris's music is a part of my soundtrack for when I'm gaming. Uh, but the almost every part of it has had an influence on me. The adventuring company attacking the villain's castle, the sneaking up and crawling up the side of a wall of a tower. The there's almost every aspect of D&D except for pure dungeon crawl. Even finding the magic sword. I mean, I know the Atlantean sword. Not, I don't know if it's magical, but it certainly has the quality of being a great artifact from an ancient time. And so the Atlantean sword is even a treasure, and it's not a dungeon in itself. It's a dungeon chamber. He fights against wolves with the sword. There's so many cool things. The battle in the battle in the ruins, the demons that come to get him, the crucifixion scene, the battle at his family's annihilation at the beginning. All that stuff, all that is very evocative of Dungeons and Dragons. The the sort of ruthless villainy of the bad guys of a classic fantasy story. Also, the determination of the heroes. Uh, I don't think there's anything from that movie I haven't at least been inspired to put into D&D. I can't think of city the dismal city, dismal, I should, maybe not dismal, but the city that he is in, cities that are in when he's, especially at the city when he finally goes to climb the tower of the Set, of the Temple of Set, and the Stygians, and Stygian sorcery, transformation, polymorphing. It's just fantastic. The next is another fantasy movie, and it is what I do consider to be the best fantasy movie ever made. I do put it above Lord of the Rings, all three parts, and that's Excalibur. John Borman's Excalibur is a fantastic movie. I found out years ago that the original cut of the movie was immensely long, many hours long, and that's the only weakness of the movie, is that it can't cover everything that happened in Le Morte d'Arthur, let alone in the entire Arthurian cycle. But it does a magnificent job of getting the main beats of Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. Also does a very good job of it's just, the armor is fantastic, made this aluminum armor that was made. The early in the movie, the armor is dark, and as Arthur creates the sort of utopian world. The armor becomes shining. Literally, they become knights in shining armor. The armor is completely ahistorical because it is a fantasy story. It is a legend. It is not, that's the kind of armor that men were wearing when Le Morte d'Arthur was written, or that's the kind of armor it would have looked like. There was definitely plate armor in the time of Sir Thomas Malory, but there is, but the armor is not at all the armor of post Roman Britain. But it doesn't matter. It's not trying to do history. It's doing legend and fantasy. Again, another movie I saw when I was very young. Again, another movie that's incredibly bloody and violent, probably even more so than the previous two movies, and a movie that has almost as much sexual content. I mean, there is some pretty graphic sexual activity in the movie early on and later on, but especially early on. It is a fantasy movie. Merlin, Lancelot, Arthur, definitely Percival's quest for the Grail, the final battle between Mordred and Arthur. I can't recommend the movie enough. Its influence on me is almost it can't really be quantified as it is the it is again it is the fantasy king as opposed to the Rand, which is the real politics of the darker, the more George R. R. Martin like politics of a fantasy setting. Excalibur is more the human, is more the archetypal, legendary, mythic kingliness. Even to the point where when the king is restored by the Holy Grail, he rides forth with his men, and literally the kingdom comes back to life. Literally, flowers and trees begin to bloom, and darkness is lifted up off the land. I mean, that is archetypical fantasy. Now, the last movie that was the biggest influence. This is the movie that was the biggest influence. I already said this one. Unlike all the previous movies on here, you can argue a few of those movies I mentioned not being great but being good. But this movie is quantifiably a bad movie. But I loved it, and I don't love it in an ironic way. This is not detached irony saying I love it because I laugh at it. There are parts of it that are worthy of being made fun of, but that's not why I like it. I like the movie because of its self, not in spite of itself. And that is Hawk the Slayer, another movie from the early 80s. This one doesn't have the level of violence or sexual nature as the previous fantasy movies on the list, like Conan and Excalibur, but or let alone heavy metal. But it is basically a cheap knockoff of it's an attempt to cash in on Star Wars. It is a fantasy Star Wars in some ways, but it's just I just love it. I love that movie, dumb as it is. I love the elf firing. They have they use the film on a loop to show him firing arrows quickly. I love the semi-automatic crossbow that the one actor is carrying. The Mind Sword, I always thought was a little bit goofy. I never had the Mind Sword in any of my campaigns, but it's a magic sword. It's not a lightsaber. It's a literal magic sword. It's a magic sword that is brought to the hand of the wielder with he uses telekinesis or to bring the weapon to his hand. It has this thing called the Mind Stone. The pommel of the sword is like a human hand. It's a fist, and then it grabs the Mind Stone and holds it like something like this. Something like this, that's the pommel of those. If you can imagine my forearm being the grip of the sword, it yeah, all its weaknesses, not all of its weaknesses, but many of its weaknesses were visible to me as as a child when I watched it. I didn't think of it as being great, but it even this day of campaign I was running not too long ago even had a witch character in it who wore a covering over her eyes. The imagery that was not intentional. I was not trying to put the witch from Hawk the Slayer into my campaign. She just was there. Uh, the bad guys in my game are much closer in their behavior to a sort of Jack Palance type character. Uh, I'm not some great thespian. I'm not some great actor. When I play a villain, it's a lot easier for me. I can play a hokey, but I can play a breathy, menacing villain. I don't really do a whole lot of like acting type stuff, but that sort of sense of menace and terror that Jack Palance gives across when as he's playing. I forgot the name of the bad Zoltan, and Zoltan's master being basically a sort of satanic figure, the witch being in opposition, and there's a giant, a dwarf. The giant is just a really tall British guy with a bald head. He's probably like 6'4", so he's not much of a giant. And the dwarf is just a small British guy who's probably about 5'2". And the contrast in their heights makes it look like, but neither of them are the shorter guy is not remarkable. It's not is not remarkably short, and the tall guy is not actually a giant. But makes for a very very funny, silly movie that I unironically still enjoy. I watched it a few years back, and all its flaws are right there, and yet I still enjoyed it. And if you could say it's the power of nostalgia, and to some degree it probably is, but also its ideas were such an influence on me as a game master and as a player, and it was important influence on my sense of how to run and play fantasy campaigns. It still to this day has some influence on me. The elven archer archetype. That's really where I saw it first. Dungeons and Dragons would come along a couple years later. I would actually have watched Hawk the Slayer before Dungeons and Dragons. The reason why I was into Dungeons and Dragons was because of Conan comic books, Conan the Barbarian, the movie, Hawk the Slayer, and the fact that I was a huge fan of myths and legends. I wanted to read about. There was a children's book version of Beowulf, and I had the world book of. I had this huge picture book of world history, and the stuff about the ancient Greeks. I read, of course, I read the children's version of The Last Stand at Thermopylae. I read the children's version of Marathon and Salamis and Plataea. These historical battles, as well as children's version of, like I said, Beowulf, Odysseus, La Morte d'Arthur. All these things were before I got into Dungeons and Dragons, and all even to this day, I'm not. I've never been as big a fan of fantasy in general as I have of history and legend, which is why Patton is an influence on me. And I didn't have Star Wars on this list or Lord of the Rings as far as movies. And if I was going to list books, Lord of the Rings wouldn't probably be on there either. Not because Lord of the Rings is not important, but because I read it later, and even though I read it later, I also read Silmarillion, and I think the Silmarillion was a much bigger influence. Silmarillion basically took over my brain for a while as far as being game master, and as you can imagine, elves became a big important part of my campaign. I was already a bit of an elf fanboy before that, but I became a sort of elf fanatic after that. But that is essentially those are my 10 movies. Uh, there's some other movies that could have been fit on here. Of course, like the movies I just mentioned that weren't Star Wars. Star Wars, The Empire, and Jedi. Uh, to be fair, the Emperor is uh, very much one of my all-time favorite characters. He is a terrifying villain. Vader is the classic Black Knight. Han Solo is a classic rogue, the lovable rogue, the rogue with the thief of the heart of gold, an unusual a trope that has come to be, that was already existent at the time. Of course, I could have added in, the Hobbit, the animated version of the Hobbit. I saw that when I was quite young. Loved it, still love it. Same thing with the Return of the King and the Ralph Bakshi animated Lord of the Rings, and yeah, there was some others. There's some stuff that could have been added in here, but I would definitely say these were the ones I just wrote down off the top of my head. And as far as westerns are concerned, there's another western that would definitely I considered putting on here, and it could have easily replaced one of the other westerns on here, and that was Winchester '73, which is very much a almost like a samurai or martial arts movie, but but a western set with a gun, where the good son has the bad son murders the father who trained the two sons, and the two sons have become enemies of each other, and they're hunting down for what is essentially a magical weapon, or it's a weapon of great quality. It is the Winchester '73, a special Winchester lever action rifle. It's a fantastic movie, and it also was an influence on me, and still is. I saw all these movies when I was very young, as opposed to, say, Lord of the Rings, where I was already nearly 30 when the Fellowship of the Ring came out. I was 29, and I'd be 30 just a few months later. Yeah, because it came out in 2001. Came out at the end of 2001, so yeah. Because it came out after September 11th. And yeah, I almost, those were not as influential on me because I didn't watch them. They would have been probably bigger influence on me if I'd watched them when I was 10. But not that I don't love them, and not that I haven't watched them a number of times, not that I don't have them on. I have them on DVD, not on Blu-ray, because I never had a Blu-ray player. But I've watched them since then. And anyway, that's getting to the end, as you can perhaps tell. The light's getting dimmer. It's nearly 5 o'clock here in Montana, and it gets dark early this far north. And this whole thing's almost over. Then the whole day's almost over, and I have a full-time job. I have to wake up very early in the morning. I'm not that far away from having to go to bed, despite it only being 5 p.m. So this is the last comment I'll make, and hopefully I assume I'm going to post this online, and as always, with the caveat that I will eventually be editing this, and this definitely could have used some editing. If I upload this, it'll be it's at 54 minutes right now, so it could be a 54-minute video would definitely be the longest video I've ever uploaded, and I hope that if you watch this, you enjoyed it.